Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So today, you are going to learn some specific strategies on how to successfully lead emerging generations. These generations include the largest generation of all time and quite possibly the most controversial, the millennials, a generation that both Ryan and I are proud to be a part of. And then the up and coming generation, a generation that is just now getting ready to flood into the workplace, Generation Z. I'm your host, Stephen Van Cohen, a millennial and co-founder of Sync Learning Experiences. So happy to be here with all of you today. Today's content is powered by SyncLX, where we create lasting learning experiences for companies' number one asset, their people, by delivering LMS courses, live workshops, and custom learning and development solutions. Unfortunately, most training is often neglected, disliked, and forgotten, but our learning solutions are actually used, enjoyed, and applied by some of today's leading companies, such as Salesforce, the Home Depot, FedEx, and John Deere. You can learn more about Sync Learning Experiences by going to synklx.com. Without further ado, I am very proud to introduce the man of the hour, Mr. Ryan Jenkins. Our speaker today, Ryan, is an internationally recognized keynote speaker and author on the topics of leadership, generational differences, and the future of work. Ryan has been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, The Wall Street Journal, and CNN Business. He is the co-founder of Sync Learning Experiences and hosts the podcast, The Future of Learning and Development. Feel free to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Ryan lives in Atlanta, Georgia, with his wife, 3 kids, and yellow Labrador. Ryan, take it away.
Thanks, Steve. And yeah, I was checking my phone right before we started this, and all 3 of my kids are at the pool right now. So they're having a great time. We're going to have an even better time, I promise. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time. Let's start here. Did you know that 75% of managers report that managing multi-generational teams is a challenge? 77% of workers identify different work expectations across generations as a challenge. And 72% of workers identify a lack of comfort with younger employees managing older employees. So no matter how you slice this generation topic, and the topic we're diving into today, is a challenge. And if you experience this challenge, you are not alone, as of course you can see in these numbers. So we're going to unpack this challenge today, and we're going to give you some very actionable strategies to help you overcome any generational tension that you encounter as it relates to especially managing and leading the emerging generations. So here's the agenda. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping here. First, we're going to give you a high overview of who this next generation is, just so that we can all be on the same page and give you some deeper insight into who they are. Then I'm going to give you, as I mentioned, strategies to specifically manage the emerging generations. And then we'll have time for Q&A. So be thinking about your questions. We'll take all of those at the end. A couple other items following this webinar that are worth mentioning. You're going to get copies of all these slides. So don't feel like you have to screenshot, although you are certainly welcome to. You also get all of our contact info. If there's any other questions we can help with, we want to be value adds to you outside of these 30 minutes that we've got with you. So you'll have all our contact info. And we're also giving away a book, my latest book, which is all about Generation Z. So we'll be giving that away to one lucky individual who stays with us through the end of our time together. So stick around, you might win a book. All right, we're gonna do some live polling as we do on all of the SyncLX webinars. So pull out your mobile device, a tablet, or even open up a new browser on your desktop and go to this link, pollev.com/live poll. Now, if you're watching this in the future, hello, I hope it's nice and bright and sunny and things are looking up wherever you are today in the future. You won't be able to interact with us live, but you will be able to see all of the respondents' live interaction during the session, which will nonetheless be insightful for you, but unfortunately you won't be able to join us live. So here's how it's going to work. When I prompt the polling slides, you'll simply see the question and the potential answers on your device or in the window that you've opened up. Simply tap or click whatever response you believe to be correct, and we're going to see your result live on the screen. All right, everyone ready? Here we go. First question is simply, what is your generation? What is your generation? I'm going to play along. And as Steve mentioned, I am of the millennial generation. And it looks like that's the bulk potentially of who we've got here is mostly millennials, followed by Gen Xers. We got some baby boomers and no Gen Z. Well, that means fair game. We can really lean into that generation. No, we won't. No generational slamming or shaming ever happens with me, but we will get to know Gen Z a little bit better. And if some of Gen Z joins a little bit later, that's great too. So great. I'm always want to get to see the makeup of the room per se. And then I also want to get you warmed up to the technology because we'll be using this throughout our time together. So let's keep moving. Here's a snapshot of the generations. Middle column is done by age as of 2020. And on the right side, that's how large the generations were at their peak. You notice those two asterisks in the bottom right. And that represents that, unfortunately, those two generations aren't that large anymore due to folks passing away, but it still gives you a good sense of how the generations have stacked up over the years. And what's really fascinating about the time that you and I find ourselves in today in this global pandemic is that this is a generational shaping event that we've encountered. And so actually this event has now created the end cap to Generation Z. That's why we now know the full generational spectrum of Gen Z. So the generation younger than Gen Z, the youngest generation, they will either not have been old enough to remember or recollect or understand or emotionally process the events that have happened around COVID-19, such as my young children. They're just not old enough to process these events, or they will not have been born. So those folks will be what is initially being termed Generation Alpha. But that's why this is such a unique time for you and I. It's because it has created the end cap for Generation Z. Now, anytime we're talking about generations, it's absolutely critical that we note that they are clues and they're not absolutes. Generations are clues, they're not absolutes. So we need to keep that in mind today and moving forward into the future. So let's look briefly at the generations that make up the workforce. So as of 2020, these are the numbers. 2016 was the first year that millennials became the dominant generation in the workforce, which is one of many reasons why you and I can't seem to go a day without hearing the term millennial, because they're a very big cohort and they've been causing lots of disruption, but now they make up 44% of the workforce. So they're all in the workforce now. Now the next generation, Gen Z, is the one that's poised to enter the workforce, and they're slowly coming in. You see them there at 8%. But they're going to come in at a rate that we have not yet experienced before. They're going to be coming in very rapidly. In fact, by 2025, this will be the makeup. 3 out of 4 workers around the globe will be of the emerging generations. So as you're absorbing this, I want you to think about the way in which you work today, and I want you to compare it with just 5 years ago. I bet a lot's changed. Of course, even if you remove the pandemic from the situation, there's been a lot of change, right? Probably the pace of work, how you communicate, the frequency in which you communicate, technology, processes, procedures. There's probably been a lot of change in those 5 years. So when we fast forward to the year 2025, there's going to be even more change, especially as more of these digital natives begin stepping into leadership roles, as more and more of Gen Z and other digital natives begin entering the workforce. There's going to be a lot of change. And so this is why I love this conversation. I love this topic. I love unpacking generations, because if we understand the emerging generations, they give us insights into what's next. And we can use that insights, we can use that information to pivot our leadership, pivot our communication, pivot our organizations to thrive in the very turbulent and uncertain future that awaits all of us. So hopefully this gives you a little context on what to expect and how the generations break down throughout the workforce. Let's talk a little bit about millennials and Gen Z. Let me give you a couple data points so that we can have a little bit better understanding of each generation. Let's start with millennials. 11.3 trillion is the projected financial assets of US millennials by 2030. This is another reason why you and I can't not hear about millennials, is because they are stepping into their prime spending years and their prime working years. And so every industry on the planet is trying to unpack who is this generation and how do we get a piece of that growing bank account. Secondly, 71% of millennials are disengaged at work, which is the most of any generation. Now, don't roll your eyes too fast at that number, because most humans, every generation, is highly disengaged at work. According to Gallup, it's over 60% for everyone. But it just so happens that millennials are just a little bit more disengaged. Now let's move to Gen Z. Let me make sure I can see this statistic here. 63% of Gen Z doesn't remember a time before the Great Recession. So the Great Recession was also a very generational shaping event for Gen Z. And we'll talk a little bit about how this has shaped them in just a minute, but that gives you a good sense of kind of where generation, kind of the social mood, some of the other implications that were happening as Gen Z came of age. And then lastly, 70% of Generation Z might reject traditional business to work independently. Now let's break that down, because I think that's really fascinating. I think you would agree with me that it's never been easier to be an entrepreneur, right? You can have an idea and jump online and launch a business, and with a couple $100 reach hundreds of thousands of people on social media. And it's never been easier to be an entrepreneur. But why does that matter to you? Well, if you're trying to attract Gen Z into your organizations, you're not only competing with the other competitors in your industry, or perhaps in your proximity to pull in this next generation talent, but you're actually competing with Gen Z's resources, ability, and desire to be an entrepreneur. So that impacts your talent attraction. It also impacts employee engagement, now that entrepreneurship is such a viable option. So this is a dynamic that really we haven't had to wrestle with, and it's been an obstacle we haven't had to overcome until pretty recently. So these are all dynamics we've got to be thinking about. So I'm going to give you some strategies to make sure that we can fully engage both of these generations. One of the top questions Steve and I always get is, what's the difference between Gen Z and millennials? So I'm going to give you 8 quick differences to help you kind of better understand what are the differences between millennials and Gen Z. I'm sure many of you, of course, over half of you, it appears, are millennials. So you've got a good understanding of this generation. So I'm going to use that understanding and to build onto that to learn more about Gen Z. So Gen Z is realistic, whereas millennials are optimistic. Millennials grew up in a time of abundance, and they were parented by the baby boom generation. So they are a very optimistic generation. Gen Z, parented by the chip on the shoulder, skeptical Gen Xers, and they're much more realistic. And also part of that is, again, back to that quote that over 60% of Gen Z came of age during can't remember a time before the Great Recession. So there was a lot of tough financial conversations that were being had inside the homes as Gen Z came of age. So thus they're going to be much more cautious than the optimistic millennial generation. Independent versus collaborative. Research shows that if you ask millennials to rearrange desks in a room, the majority of the time they'll arrange them in a circle. So they value collaboration. Gen Z, on the other hand, is much more independent. They're a very do-it-yourself mentality generation. Private versus public. Millennials came of age as social media was ramping up, and we would share everything, right? We were sharing anything that came to our brain. We were making it very public. Gen Z have seen some of the pitfalls of that, and they're thinking about being much more private with some of their information. That's why we've seen a lot of anonymous social networks gain a lot of traction. That's why Snapchat continues to be popular, as there's a certain level of privacy that's embedded into that platform. Digital natives versus digital pioneers. Just take that at face value. Millennials were kind of the first digital pioneers, but Gen Z, they can't remember a world where a smart device has been outside of arm's reach. That's changed everything. And the whole entire Gen Z generation, okay, even as a millennial, this makes my hips hurt when I say it, okay? Gen Z, the entire generation, is younger than Google. So they literally have never known a world where information hasn't been curated into a blank search box. Pretty extraordinary to think about. On demand versus formally educated. This is really spinning on its head right now during the pandemic, but millennials pursued education, right? Became the the generation that has the most degrees. They're the most generation that's been formally educated. They've also got enormous amounts of debt. Gen Z's thinking about, they're seriously questioning, is higher education a good thing? Is that something I should pursue, or should I hack my education? So they have a much more mindset of on-demand learning and how might be able to cobblestone my education together and avoid the debt. Role hopping versus job hopping. Millennials were job hoppers because they had the world's opportunities at their fingertips. So it was very easy for them to find new opportunities and job hop. Research indicates that Gen Z is actually more interested in role hopping. And I imagine this will be even more true on the other side of this pandemic. Gen Z is not interested in job hopping. They're interested in having multiple roles inside an organization, which is why creating work that's fluid, or organizations that are fluid, are going to be highly attractive for Gen Z. Global citizen versus global spectator. Gen Z is they're the first global generation. And again, this pandemic is really amplifying that. They've got a lot of global unity. They've been having to be able to play Xbox with a headset on. They've been able to connect in real time with someone half around the world as they game. Truly a global generation. And finally, face-to-face versus digital only. Millennials put a high emphasis on digital communications. Gen Z is actually interested, over 70% actually want to communicate more face-to-face inside the workplace. So very distinct differences. So hopefully that gives you, again, some good context on who is Gen Z. All right, you're understanding the next gen. Now let's get into some strategies. Let's give you some really actionable tools here to get you effectively managing the next generation. And this is the framework. I'm gonna give you a strategy in each one of these buckets. And these buckets are the 3 must-haves at work for the emerging generations. So here they are. Number 1, they want a better boss. Top talent view effective leaders as a must. Number 2, they want bigger vision. Top talent want to connect work with impact, and they want a brighter future. Top talent have a proclivity to be future oriented. Now, you might be looking at this, you might be thinking, Ryan, you're asking yourself this question. You're thinking, Ryan, doesn't every generation want these 3 things at work? Like, I want these 3 things and I'm a Gen Xer. I want these 3 things, I'm a boomer. And my short answer to that is yes. I think if we boil it down, these are all the things that every one of us, no matter generation, we want at work. But here's the big X factor. Here's the gap. For previous generations, these were nice to haves. For the emerging generations, these are conditions of employment. To where if we're not delivering these as leaders, if we're not delivering these as organizations, the emerging generations are literally a finger swipe away from going somewhere else. So this is why we've got to get it right. And here are some tools to help you get it right. Let's kick off our first strategy with this poll. The emerging generations want blank 50% more often than other employees. What do you think? And if you're just now joining us and you're joining us live, welcome. If you visit the link that you see at the top of the screen, at the top of the slide, you'll be able to chime in live. You'll be able to see the poll right away. Click whatever response you believe to be correct, and we'll see your responses live. All right, looks like coaching is the primary, the top response here. Great guess. I think we could make an argument for any one of these, but the correct answer is feedback. Feedback. So let's talk about feedback. And this is going to fall into the better boss bucket. And I want to talk to you about how quality feedback can elevate performance. So recently, some research was done where they took a group of 7th graders and they tasked them with the same task where they had to write an essay. So they all wrote an essay, they turned those essays in, and teachers separated those essays randomly into 2 groups, Group A and Group B. And in the first Group A, this is the type of feedback that they provided on those papers. They wrote this: I'm giving you these comments so that you'll have feedback on your paper. Very straightforward. That resulted in 40% of students revising and resubmitting their papers. Not a bad outcome, but definitely some room for improvement. Group B gave this feedback. I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations and I know you can reach them. That resulted in double the amount of people revising and resubmitting their papers. 80% did that. And in addition, they made twice as many corrections as Group A. The students made twice as many corrections as Group A. So what do we learn from this? Well, by in your feedback, by providing high standards and assurance, it equated to doubled performance. Now, many of you who are managers or leaders, you're leading teams that are much more complicated than 7th graders. Perhaps there might be some exceptions out there. So we got to take this a step further, right? Because we have very complex teams. So high standards and assurance is important, but also direction and support is crucial. So these 4 items create the feedback formula that's most effective. And especially since this emerging generation is craving more feedback, this is a great way to structure your feedback. So it might look something like this. I have high expectations for you. I know you can meet them. So try this new challenge. And if you fail, I'll help you recover. It could be as simple as that. So our first strategy for you is to try the feedback formula. Here it is again. Use this formula to inspire belief, transform work ethic, and instill confidence in the emerging generations. Try it out. I think you'll be surprised with the elevation of performance that you get from it. All right, we talked about better boss. Let's move now to bigger vision. And here's another poll. I want you to be completely honest here. You're not going to hurt my feelings or Steve's feelings, but I want you to be honest. How many times have you interacted with your phone during this presentation? Or if you've even gone over and checked a news site or checked I was about to say sports scores, but that's probably not happening. You probably definitely checked some social media site or some type of news outlet. So just be honest. This is actually great news. Most of you 1 to 5 times. That's the bucket I'd probably be in, maybe 5 to 10. And then the next part of you, none. Wow, I'm really, I need to know the secret as to how all those nunners, you're focusing. That's extraordinary. All right, so on the heels of this question, just kind of wanted to grease the wheels because here's a question that we often get asked that I'm sure you've asked yourself as well. How do I lead a distraction-prone generation? And first, we got to start here. We've got to understand that phones aren't to blame for distracted employees. They're not to blame. What's to blame is a lack of compelling narrative. That's what's the problem. There's a lack of a compelling narrative. Fulfillment is not found through scrolling, but by contributing to a worthy mission. You and I, we will retreat to our phones when the alternative is less compelling. So as leaders, we have to draw our followers into a compelling narrative. That's how we're going to gain attention and win over the hearts and minds of those in our organization, especially with the emerging generation that is highly distraction prone. So here's something to consider. Invite them into a compelling narrative. And how you do that is by answering the 3 burning questions that every follower secretly asks of their leader. You ready for them? Here they are. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how do I fit in? Those are the 3 questions your followers are asking of you as a leader. And you have to answer these 3 things. That those first 2 questions should be the same throughout the team, in fact, throughout the whole organization. But it's that last one that's really critical. And that's what can really, again, win the attention, heart, and mind of those that you're leading. So invite them into a compelling narrative. All right, my friends, our time's winding down. Let's camp out for a brighter future, and then we'll take some of your questions. And here's the last poll. So if you haven't got one right yet, this is your chance. I believe. What has the strongest impact on employee engagement? What do you think? Progress, recognition, challenging work, community outreach, support of coworkers, fun work environment? Case to be made for all of these. But in the interest of time, because we want to make sure we can answer as many questions as we can, the correct answer here is progress. Progress. So I want to answer this question that's going to eventually find its way to talking about progress. But I want to answer this question. Why are video games so engaging? They're highly engaging. And for those of you that don't believe me, just look at this data. You ready? 66% of Generation Z say gaming is their main hobby. 53% of 23 to 36-year-olds pay for gaming services, outpacing those who pay for cable TV. That's huge. That shift just happened at the end of last year. The first time that gaming services is outpacing cable. Massive shift. And this last number is extremely staggering. So if you are standing up right now, or you're on a treadmill, or you're somewhere where you might fall over, find a seat, because this is really staggering. You ready? 948 million hours, or over 107,000 years of streamed gaming content are watched in only 1 month. And it's all at work. Can you believe this? Okay, it's not all at work. That was fake news. It's not all at work, but all that content is consumed in 1 month. That's staggering. Gaming is highly, highly engaging. And why are video games so engaging? Because of progress. Games inform players of where they started, how far they've come, and what's left to accomplish. If we can begin to weave more elements of gaming into our leadership, we have a high probability of engaging the people that we lead, especially the emerging generations. So here's our final strategy to consider, and that is acknowledge progress. Recognize and reflect back to workers their progress. Too often we're so busy and we don't look for these opportunities to reflect back the progress that we're seeing in our teams. So that could be, examples could be completing a goal, accomplishing a small win, overcoming an obstacle, learning a new skill, achieving a breakthrough. All great opportunities to reflect back the progress you're seeing, again, to win the engagement and to draw out performance and to instill more meaning into the work of those that are among your team. Let's take this one step further. This is some interesting research. Over 46 years of employee motivation studies, there's only one answer that has been cited every time among the top employee motivators. Now, when Steve or I are live in a session, we ask people to give us some feedback, what they think that one answer is. And oftentimes people might say career growth. That's not it. Benefits? Nope. Job security? Nope. Compensation? Nope. The number one most cited answer, full appreciation for the work done. So my friends, extend appreciation while acknowledging progress, and you'll be rewarded with worker loyalty and high performance, especially from this emerging generation. All right, so let's recap what we've learned today. 3 musts at work for the emerging generations are better boss, bigger vision, brighter future. Try the feedback formula, which is what you see there. Invite them into a compelling narrative by answering the 3 questions that you see there. And lastly, acknowledge progress, recognize and reflect back to workers their progress, and extend appreciation for the work done. Those are our strategies that are going to work marvelously for you, especially when you're leading this emerging generation. All right, let's jump into some Q&A now. I want you to be thinking about your questions, and we're going to be using the same polling feature to answer or to ask your questions. Before we get there, we'd love to tell you how we can work together and how we can create lasting learning experiences for your team. And so that is through off-the-shelf digital courses for your LMS. We could deliver in-person or virtual workshops as well. And we do a lot of custom L&D solutions. So that might be digitizing or modernizing training materials, custom digital courses. We've got a fabulous team that does some extraordinary work. So if any of these things resonate with you, or you just want to explore a little bit further, send me an email. There's my email. Send me an email. We'd love to start the conversation and would love to help in any of these areas. And what we shared with you today is a sample of a lot of the content that we deliver in digital formats or in live workshops as well. So I want to hear your questions. So use the polling feature. So you just visit that website or pull up that the poll, and you'll be able to submit your questions. And guess what? Everybody can actually vote up and down the questions that they want Steve or I to answer. So use that function. Don't forget, again, you can email me. You're going to have all these slides, and we're going to choose a winner for the book as you guys are typing in your questions. So Steve, who is the lucky winner of the book today?
Ryan, the fact that 40% of the people said that they have not looked at their phone one time is validated because everyone who started on the webcast is still here today at the end, which is awesome. I think everyone wants this book. So let me to pick the winner. I'm for whatever reason, the lucky number today is going to be 5. So the 5th person down the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is Andy Johnson. Andy Johnson is going to receive the Generation Z guide, everything you need to know on how to be able to maximize Generation Z in the workplace. So congratulations, Andy.
All right, Andy, way to go. We'll send you an email on how you can grab that book. Thanks for being with us. Everyone else, submit your questions. We've got a few coming in, so we'll address these. I know we kept you for just 30 minutes. If you've got to go, you'll get a recording of this webinar, so feel free to jump to your next commitment. And thanks again for being here. For those that want to stick around, we'll answer as many questions as we can here. All right, the first one is, how does gender impact on the trends and strategies? That's a great question. There is some subtle differences across genders, across ethnicity, race, across cultures. I don't have any specific data to share with you today, but what is fascinating about the emerging generations is because of the proliferation of cheap mobile technology and how ubiquitous connectivity is around the world, the emerging generations are much similar to each other than previous generations, which is really astounding. So Steve and I go all around the world and teach this stuff. Me specifically, I have an expertise in generational differences, and I go all around the world, and it is fascinating how similar these generations are. And a lot of it's because they're connected, and so they're experiencing some of the same life-changing technology, innovations, and significant events in real time together with their global peers. And thus it's unifying them. So it's really, these generations are so much similar, and a lot of the tendencies and behaviors and expectations we shared with you today are applicable across gender, race, countries, but also keep in mind they're clues, not absolutes. Anything to add to that, Steve?
No, I think that's a very, very nice synopsis, Ryan. I would like to answer the next question though. How do our leaders who are, or no, it just jumped. Is there a penalty with Millennials and Gen Zs if you reward/recognize for minor progress instead of waiting for something more significant to point to? That's an awesome question. That's an awesome question. I will just give a little bit more add-on, Ryan. The strategy around progress, a lot of the research and a lot of the work that I've done within the leadership space around progress comes from Teresa Amabile. So Teresa is a Harvard professor. She wrote a great book called The Progress Principle. And really the research that she was able to uncover is that small wins, incremental successes that make you get closer to whatever the end goal is the secret to feeling that motivational sense of achievement, accomplishment. I'm moving in the right direction this way versus feeling stuck or having to overcome all these obstacles. So, can you recognize too much? I think that's a really valuable question. And I would say that there's a difference between giving positive recognition for standardized tasks, core things that they should be doing as a part of their everyday that are just normal, like I'm going to do this consistently week in and week out, and finding the little things that they're doing that amplify a skill or a behavior or something that you saw that you want to reinforce. Oftentimes, reinforcement is misconstrued to be recognition. Recognition is, I want to make this person feel valued. I want to make them feel appreciated. So I'm going to recognize them. Reinforcement is about making sure that they know they've done something good so you can reinforce that behavior over and over and over again. So if we only wait until they've thrown the Hail Mary and saved the day or have gone way above and beyond the call of duty, that gap might be too long and people might start to doubt themselves and the work that they're doing. And if they're not getting that continuous reinforcement, that self-doubt kicks in, right? What was once a no feedback is good feedback, right? Like I know I'm doing a good job because my boss isn't telling me about the work I'm doing, is no longer the case. If I'm a millennial or a Gen Z and I'm not getting any kind of feedback validation, I am really doing something catastrophic. And that's where we go instantaneously. So more is better in this sense than less, right?
Yeah, great point, Steve. And yeah, that was going to be my point too, is there's a distinction between reward and recognize, what was highlighted in the question there. So the other thing I would do is this is a human thing. This isn't even a generational thing. It's a human thing. There's three things we want at work. We want in life and at work, and that's to survive, belong, and become. Survive, belong, and become. And the belong aspect is where we're seeing the idea of progress happening, right? Is because constantly our brain is scanning the tribe in which we're involved with. And we're constantly scanning going, am I valued here? Am I contributing to this tribe? Because back when our ancestors roamed the plains, if you weren't contributing, you likely might have gotten excluded from that group. And then your likelihood of surviving, very low. So our brains still operate that way. We're constantly scanning the surroundings, wondering, are we doing good work? Are we valued by the team? And so a way for you to satisfy that very deep human need is through this idea of reflecting back the progress and pointing out how people are progressing and what type of contribution they're making. So we gave a lot to chew on there. Great question and great response, Steve. Let's go to the second one here. How do we approach our leaders who are set in their ways that don't align with the incoming current generations? Lack of feedback, transparency, trust, etc.
Yeah.
You want to start?
Very easy. It's never been easier in history to find new employment, right? The ability to go out and connect either through LinkedIn or Glassdoor or any of the thousands of recruiting companies that exist, finding a job is not like it was 20 years ago, which means for leaders who are set in their ways and are either inadvertently or directly driving young talent away because they will not change, it's very important to start to understand the gravity of the situation, because no longer are people just going to work in an environment that they're not happy with. They will leave, right? 71% of millennials are disengaged at work. That's a huge number. And instead of remaining disengaged at work, they are leaving and they will continue to leave. So part of the strategy with getting leaders on board is, I think, first making them understand how significant this is. This isn't 20 years ago where people are just going to continue to stick around. And second, the strategies that Ryan provided, these aren't super massive, huge paradigm shifts where we have to rethink everything we're doing, right? It's giving a little bit more feedback and making sure that they understand when they're making progress. It's being included on the vision and knowing the impact that they're making on the business. It's finding ways for them to be able to take on different roles and responsibilities. These are things that anybody can do pretty easily within our organization. So if we keep it simple, and if we let these leaders know why this is so important, that's the first step to hopefully getting them on board with some of the things they need to be doing.
Yes, tremendous. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that that is the case, because now more than ever, leaders, we should be agile. We should be understanding the value of a diverse and inclusive team, and we should be trying to draw out the different perspectives and ideas from a team. So it's unfortunate that this is a situation that someone finds themselves in. You gave some great insights. The only thing I think I would add to that was actually, whoever asked this question, feel free to send me an email. I wrote an article for Inc. about how Chick-fil-A invented actually how one store owner invented the Chick-fil-A milkshake. And it's a masterclass on how you go about creating lasting organizational change and how that individual created the milkshake. So rather than going that deep today, whoever asked that question or anyone else interested, send me an email and I will send you a link to that article, because I think it'll be very helpful and give you some really actionable framework for how to approach leaders and to create more favorable and lasting change.
Yeah. So the next one, Ryan, just really quick, because I have an expertise in this space. Do you find that Gen Z characteristics hold true for those working in production or trades positions? So I come from the mining industry. I was an internal consultant for the largest mining company in the world. And I've spent a lot of time working in mining, oil and gas, energy, manufacturing, basically hard hat industries. And the short answer is yes. Of course, the characteristics definitely hold true, regardless of the industry, the role, the skill sets, the education level, the things that Ryan says. Generations are clues; they're not absolutes. Really, really important to be aware of. But he says they're pretty big clues, and oftentimes those clues can lead us down some really important insights. And as I've worked with the industries that I've worked in, yes, Generation Z, emerging professionals who are coming into trades roles as electricians or truck drivers or people working in manufacturing, they definitely want the same kinds of bigger vision, all the things that Ryan mentioned as a core part of the work that they're doing. Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I'd agree too. It's the needs are the same, but it's the how that might differ. So, for example, the need for consistent and helpful feedback is the need, but how it's delivered might be different, right? That's going to be different in someone who's in an accounting firm versus someone that's in the trades. How you deliver that feedback. An accounting firm, it might be software. In a trades position, it might be face to face. So oftentimes, and this is really true of all of us, right? Human needs aren't that different across generations. It's the how. That's the big jump, and that's the big difference, and that's where we see all the generational gaps. So that's my response to that one. I want to address this question because it's a low-hanging fruit. What was the name of the book that you said? And I think it was The Progress Principle by Teresa Ambile, correct, Steve?
Progress Principle. So she wrote an article on Harvard Business Review. If you just type in Google Teresa Amabile, Amabile, Progress, the article will pop up, really good. And then her book is called The Progress Principle, also very, very good. So definitely go check that out. And then the last one, Ryan, we got one more. So let's do it quick. We still have a good group hanging with us after hours. These are our late night.
Extra credit for everyone.
Just don't want to go home yet. We're not ready to get to work. So where do most organizations drop the ball with the strategies you provided? I have my take, but Ryan, I'm happy.
Go ahead. Jump in.
Sure.
Yes.
The biggest opportunity, and there's a really, really good video that helps to summarize this concept by Simon Sinek. So Simon Sinek, he has a really interesting best practice called speak last. Leaders should speak last. And he wrote a whole book called Leaders Eat Last. Basically, the whole premise is when leaders take too much responsibility on themselves, they inadvertently disinclude the people around them. And when it comes to the questions that Ryan asked of where are we going, why are we going there, and then what's my involvement, in my opinion, that is where the ball gets dropped far too frequently. Because the leader wants to tell everyone everything. This is my vision. This is where we're going. This is what you're going to be doing. And it's almost a one-way communication channel where I'm just going to tell you and hopefully through my enthusiasm and excitement get you on board. But Simon says, in order to create true inclusivity, is leaders should speak last in the sense of this is where I want to go. But instead of telling you all how I think we should get there, what are your ideas? How should we do this? What do you think the involvement should be? What's your play, right? You turn yourself into a facilitator versus a presenter. And when you speak last, then you create the right opportunity for everyone to be involved. And the more involved they are in what we're going to be doing as a team or an organization, the more likely you're going to get that, highly engaged workforce. So in my opinion, that doesn't happen enough. And it could be something that very quickly creates higher levels of morale and engagement at work. So that would be mine. What do you think, Ryan?
See, I knew you were going to share that one, Steve. So that's why I decided to speak last. We've worked too long together. Tremendous. Yep. I wholeheartedly agree with that strategy with Steve. My answer to this one would be, let me give it some context. There's a pervasive myth in the workplace today that we are supposed to leave our hope and our joy and our sorrow and our emotions at the door of work. And any human, we do not have that switch to flip when we shouldn't be our personal selves and our professional selves. We are a whole person that brings our hopes and joys and sorrows and all these things to work. And I think where people drop the ball the most, specifically leaders, is, and I'm guilty of this because I'm a very ambitious driven, as I'm sure many that are on this right now, you're very ambitious, and leaders just have a tendency to be that vision casting, let's go. And so often we drop the ball when we don't show up for others. We don't create that margin to be a highly emotionally intelligent leader, to connect with the individual. So we can go off and start executing all these strategies, but we also need to remember that we need to very show up and connect. And as the world gets more high tech and as the world goes faster and faster, I believe the future of work is emotional intelligence. And the leaders and the organizations that are going to thrive in the futures are going to be those that understand their own personal emotions very well, and they can understand, connect, and manage other people's emotions very well as well. If you're interested in more of this topic, Steve and I have some content on emotional intelligence that we just released. Send me an email. We'll get you some of that stuff. But that would be my response, is that too often leaders are wanting to check those boxes and run. And so often, myself included, we got to stop and really connect at a human level and be highly emotionally intelligent.
So you're a better boss and I'm brighter future. I don't know, man. We got a lot to continue to dissect, me and you.
Yes.
Definitely
Well,
opportunities all around, for sure.
Yes. Thank you. That's all the questions. I checked on my phone. That's all the questions. Tremendous questions. Thank you for your time. We want to end with this. We know leading is challenging, no doubt. We know you want to get it right. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, and we can help. So visit synklx.com if you want to learn more. Thank you again for your time and attention. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Ryan.
See you guys.